For 15 years, I believed I knew the man I married. We had built a quiet life together. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. We laughed over dinner, argued about little things, celebrated birthdays, and comforted each other through difficult times. If anyone had asked me to describe my husband, I would have called him honest, dependable, and kind. Looking back now, I realize how easy it is to trust someone when you have no reason not to. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I had left work earlier than usual because a meeting had been canceled, and on my way home, I decided to stop by my husband's office. I wanted to surprise him and take him out for lunch. It wasn't something I did often, but I thought it would be a nice change from our usual routine. When I arrived, his assistant smiled politely and told me he had already left about 20 minutes earlier. That surprised me. He had texted me in the morning to say he would be in meetings until late evening, so I thanked her and headed back to my car assuming something had changed. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw his car a few vehicles ahead of me. At first, I smiled. I thought I had caught him on his way home. But instead of taking the road that led toward our neighborhood, he turned in the opposite direction. I don't know why, but something told me to keep driving. I stayed far enough behind that he wouldn't notice me. I kept telling myself I was being ridiculous, that there was probably a simple explanation for wherever he was going. About 30 minutes later, he pulled into a quiet residential street I had never seen before. I watched as he parked, stepped out of his car, and walked toward a small cream-colored house. Before he reached the front door, it opened. A little girl came running outside. She threw her arms around as though she had been waiting for him all day. Then a woman appeared in the doorway. She smiled at him the same way I used to. And at that moment, I felt something inside me quietly begin to break. That evening, I acted as though nothing had happened. I made dinner, we ate together, and we talked about our day the way we always did. The only difference was that I found myself paying attention to every word he said. When he mentioned how busy work had been and how the meetings had taken longer than expected, I simply nodded. A few hours earlier, I had watched him walk into a house where a woman and a little girl were waiting for him, yet he spoke so naturally that anyone listening would have believed every word. I wanted to ask him about the house, but something held me back. If I confronted him too soon, he could easily explain it away, and I would still be left wondering whether he was telling the truth. I needed to know exactly what was going on before I said anything. The next morning, after he left for work, I couldn't stop thinking about that little girl. She had looked so happy to see him, and the way she had run into his arms didn't look like the reaction of a child meeting a family friend. It looked familiar, comfortable, almost as if she had done it countless times before. By lunchtime, I had made up my mind. I was going back to that house. The next day, I drove back to the same street just after lunch. I parked a little farther away because I didn't want anyone to notice my car. I had no real plan. I only wanted answers. The house looked ordinary. Children were riding their bicycles nearby, a woman was watering flowers across the street, and a delivery driver was dropping off a package a few houses away. It was the kind of quiet neighborhood where nothing ever seemed out of place. After waiting for almost 20 minutes, the front door finally opened. The little girl came outside carrying a teddy bear. She couldn't have been older than 8 or 9. A few seconds later, my husband stepped out behind her. He bent down to zip her jacket because she was struggling with it, and she laughed when he accidentally caught a strand of her hair. He apologized, gently moved it away from her face, and she wrapped her arms around his neck as if it was something she did every day. I don't know why that hurt more than anything else I'd seen. It wasn't the hug. It was how natural it felt. A moment later, the woman came outside holding 3 ice cream cones. She handed one to my husband, one to the little girl, and kept the last one for herself. The 3 of them started walking slowly down the street, talking and laughing like any ordinary family enjoying a quiet afternoon together. I watched until they disappeared from view. By then, I wasn't trying to convince myself that I had misunderstood the situation anymore. I was trying to understand how my husband had managed to keep an entire part of his life from me. As I reached out for my car keys, someone knocked gently on my window. It was the elderly woman from the house next door. She smiled kindly and said, "I've seen you twice now. Are you looking for someone?" I lowered the window and forced a smile. "I'm sorry," I said. "I think I may have taken the wrong turn." The woman smiled, but I could tell she didn't believe me. "It's easy to get lost around here," she replied. "Most people only come to this street if they're visiting someone." I glanced towards the end of the road where my husband had disappeared with the woman and the little girl. "They seem very close," I said, trying to sound casual. She followed my eyes and smiled. "Oh, that family? They're lovely people." I didn't say anything. She continued speaking as though we had known each other for years. "The little girl is such a sweetheart. She waits by the window every Friday because she knows he'll come. You should see how excited she gets whenever his car turns the corner. Every Friday." For years, my husband had told me Fridays were his busiest days at work. He always came home late and looked exhausted. Sometimes he even said he had to travel out of town for meetings that couldn't be postponed. I had never questioned him. Her mother had been through a lot, but she's lucky to have someone who never stopped showing up for them. I thanked her, started my car and drove away before she could say anything else. That evening, while my husband was taking a shower, I opened the calendar on my phone. I went back through old photos, dinner reservations, anniversary pictures, and messages. It didn't take long before I noticed something that made my stomach turn. Almost every Friday for the past several years, he had been working late. And I had believed him every single time. For the next 2 days, I didn't mention a word about what I had seen. I wanted to. There were moments when I almost asked him where he had been or why he kept lying about working late, but something always stopped me. I wasn't ready to hear another excuse. Indeed, I watched him more carefully than I ever had before. On Friday afternoon, he called to say he would be home late because a client had scheduled an emergency meeting. I didn't argue. I simply told him to drive safely. About an hour later, I found myself sitting in my car on the same street again. This time I wasn't there to guess. I wanted the truth. His car arrived a few minutes later. The little girl ran out of the house the moment she heard the engine. She threw her arms around him before he had even closed the car door. He laughed, picked her up, and spun her around. The woman stood on the porch smiling as she watched them. I don't know why I got out of my car. Maybe I was tired of imagining things. Maybe I was tired of crying alone. Whatever the reason was, I crossed the street before I could change my mind. None of them noticed me until I was standing right in front of the house. My husband turned around fast. The smile on his face disappeared. He looked as though he had seen a ghost. The little girl slowly let go of his hand and looked from him to me, completely confused. I looked at my husband and asked the only question that mattered. "Who are they?" He didn't answer. The woman took one step forward, looked at him, and quietly said, "You can't hide it anymore." For a long moment, nobody spoke. The little girl looked at the three of us, clearly confused by the silence. She reached for my husband's hand, but he didn't move. His eyes never left mine. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have told you a long time ago." I folded my arms. "Then tell me now." He nodded slowly. "It started 9 years ago." He explained that he had met the woman through a charity program at work. She had recently lost her husband and was struggling to raise her daughter alone. She had no family nearby, no steady income, and was on the verge of losing the small house they were living in. "At first, I only wanted to help," he said. "I paid a few bills, bought groceries when they needed them, and helped the little girl get back into school. I honestly believed it would only be for a few months." He lowered his head before speaking again. "It started as a way to help them," he said quietly. "But months turned into years. The little girl began seeing me as the only father she had, and I couldn't walk away." I looked at him. "Then why didn't you tell me?" He sighed. "Because I was ashamed. I knew how it would look. Every year I wanted to tell you, but the longer I waited, the harder it became." I felt tears sting my eyes. "It wasn't the help that hurt me," I said. "It was the fact that you kept such a big part of your life from me." He didn't argue. He simply stood there in silence, knowing there was nothing he could say to undo the damage. I didn't forgive him that day. For weeks we barely spoke. He apologized over and over, but I needed time to heal. Eventually we met and had an honest conversation. He admitted that keeping the secret had been the biggest mistake of his life. We chose to fight over our marriage. It wasn't easy, but with time, marriage counseling, and honestly, we slowly rebuilt the trust we had lost. Looking back, I don't think helping that woman and her daughter was wrong. Keeping it from me was. Because I learned that it's not always the secret that destroys the marriage, it's the silence.